Hello everyone. So it's a very unfortunate video to have to make, but it does need to be talked about in wider Irish society because unfortunately it's become far too common, and we've seen in recent times both one incident in Dublin just 2 weeks ago and one in Fermanagh about 2 or 3 months ago, and then we've known about the infamous one at Ballyjamestuff a few years ago, and then a few others around the country too, and that's to do with murder suicides. Um, and we've seen in Fingers particularly the very sad incident of a young girl, 5 years old. Um, her father killed her, and then killed himself. And the same would what happened in Fermanagh a month or so ago, 2 or 3 months ago. The father killed his his wife and then his children. Um, dreadful stuff, and it's very saddening thing to talk about. But it does have to be talked about, and it does have to be talked because it is unfortunately far too common. As I say, there's two incidents in less than a few months, and then a few others that I didn't even talk about. And I'm sure people would remember, and I still remember to this day hearing about it in Ballyjamestuff about 6 years ago, 7 years ago. A teacher in Ballyjamestuff that killed his two children and his wife. Dreadful stuff, and I still remember the day hearing it, and I still can't really come to terms with that either. On all those behind it. But the thing about it is, it's to do with mental health too, because obviously people who do these things are not with it, are not fully understanding what they're doing. Like, nobody, I don't think anybody could do it. There's no words to see why somebody would do such a thing to the own family. And obviously it has to do with psychological stuff, and particularly the one in Ballyjamestuff, you know, very serious mental health problems. And we have to take these things serious in this country when it comes to mental health and stuff, to try and stop these incidents from happening. Because there were signs in many of these cases that something was wrong, something was very seriously wrong. And we didn't see it, or some people chose to ignore it in a lot of cases. I'm not saying about all the cases, but in majority of cases, even cases in the US and stuff, I've looked into them, and even in different parts, even the UK, take for example, there was always something to suggest something was wrong in the individual who done these things. But it's a very, very difficult thing, I'm sure you would agree, because you can't see the main problem in life is you can't see into other people's minds. You can't see what they're thinking, what's going on in outona, in like the outona stuff. You can never see what's going on internally. But the exterior you can see what's happening, but in the internally, it's the same with internal bleeding, etc. If you bang your head, you might look fine on the outside, but when you get a scan, etc., you see the damage. But it's very concerning. It's really, really concerning. And we do have to talk about this in Irish society, how we can try and find the pieces to try and figure out how this happens in Irish society and come to terms with it too, because it's a dread, particularly with the young girl. It's a dreadful thing, and I feel so sorry for the mother who had to come in and find the bodies there. There's nothing that can be said to try and find the comfort in that situation. Um, just it's devastating. But we do have to, as a society, we have to try and find some way of finding the signs. If something, God forbid, if it was our neighbours or friends or something, that there was a sign that something was off, something wasn't right. And we do have to take, and the state too needs to take mental health seriously, because there's too many people too waiting on waiting lists for mental health treatment. And there's people that's been put on tablets for mental health, happy tablets and other tablets. And they could do more harm to them than any good, to be totally honest. They could do more harm than good. And then there's other aspects too. People nowadays, the doctors, just throw you tablets and they don't talk to people. And that's the main problem taking with mental health in this country too. Because we don't sit the person down and have a discussion with them and talk about their feelings and how they feel and what's annoying them, what's at them. We just kind of throw them tablets and hope that does it. And that doesn't unfortunately do it, because it doesn't solve the root cause. It might help, but it doesn't solve the root. It doesn't get, it's like a weed. You pull a weed, but you might 10 minutes later the weed will be up again. But you have to go and get the root of the weed, to pull out the weed, to get to the problem, if that makes any sense, to solve the problem, or to find a solution, or to find a way to walk around. Because there's nothing in life that can't be worked out. It becomes a mental health crisis, etc. things can always be found, as long as the help's there. But the problem is the help's not there. The system is not there to support people who need it, and that's the problem. That's the main problem in this country. It's but we do have to talk about it in society, because I think the first aspect is having the discussion about it, having the fair and open discussion, but because it is a very sensitive topic too, like we're not going to jump in and start shouting at people, etc. But it is very sensitive, and we have to understand that this is really, really sensitive stuff. And we do have to have a discussion about it in society, because unfortunately these are becoming more common. And even in other countries too, the United States, is becoming more frequent than ever. And it's something we do have to look at, because it can happen tomorrow, it can happen next week, unfortunately. And as a society, we need to know how to come to terms with this, how to try and prevent this from happening. Because it is very hard, it's a very complicated thing. As I say, you can't see inside other people's minds. But there is science, and we have to learn them, we have to discuss it as a society. But the only thing I can say is God help the poor families, both in Fermanagh and Finglas too, and even the family in Ballygym stuff too. Years later, you never could find peace after it. If it ever happened in my family, I don't know, could I ever get over it, be able to come to terms with, not even get over, but come to terms with the situation that happened. So we pray for their families, and hope God can help them find some kind of closure. That's all I hope. It's as I say, it's a dreadful subject to talk about, but it has to be talked about in society. It can't just be ignored and told forget about and stuff. It's something that can't be done, and it has to be done for the good of society, for the good of the whole society, every citizen of our society. That we have to try and have a discussion first of all, and then try and find solutions to work out these, to try and find the science of this. I know it might not make sense, but there is logic behind it. But anyway, let me know what you think. Unfortunately, as I say, it's a very gruesome topic, and I'm sorry to have to bring this up, but it does need to be talked about. I wish I didn't have to be here to talk about it, but it does have to be talked about in society. And I think ignoring it and pretending it didn't happen doesn't help anybody. And I think we owe it to society that we find a solution, find some kind of way of seeing the science of it. Anyway, let me know what you think. Bye.